and I will say I got a little spoiled with it because when Brian and I did the Dams, you know, it was a 24-page comic, but the publisher pretty much said, and Brian said, you know, if you need to expand it a little bit, if you want to do a 26-page, if you want to go to 28 pages, it's fine, just do it. So I got used to having that kind of flexibility, and now I'm working with publishers, and I got this new book I'm working on, this new limited series. I said, so how many pages do I have per issue? And they said 22. I was like, okay, so what's my flexibility on that? He said 22. And that's really tough adjustment for me to stay in that kind of.
Well, I know we'll get to Matt to talk about, you know, you're now also working with publishers who have ads in the books, which affects the pacing.
And that was the other thing I kept trying to say.
You never know where it's going.
You know, I asked the editor, I said, you know, when I have a reveal, I want to make sure it's on the flip of the page. I said, you have no control over that. And honestly, once he told me that, he said, you just have no control. We're going to put the ads wherever, you know, the publisher's going to put the ads where we want to. That kind of freed me up. I said, well, it's not my problem at this point.
Well, that's kind of like writing a TV show and not knowing where the commercial breaks are. You know, it totally ruins the pacing.
I just had to make sure every page was so awesome.
Which I'm sure wasn't that hard for you, being the great writer
So
that you
simple. So simple.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, so my process is I just come up with a list of things I want to draw. And then, don't mind laughing.
Not
so
cars.
I'll make a list, and then off of that, little story ideas and little moments will start to just sort of pop into my head, and I'll write those down. And then I'll sort of get a feel for what the story is or what it's about. And then sometimes I'll type up a full script. Not a full script. I'll type up like a 20-page description of what the comic is going to be like. And then off that I'll just do thumbnails, and I'll write it as a thumbnail. And then add the dialogue and all that later. But what was I going to say? Yeah, so like for Super Spy, I had an idea for like 6 characters and some of their stories, and then the rest of that just sort of grew naturally out of what I'd done before.
You and Cullen work a little differently too. Like, I mean, like, what is your approach to plot? Like, how important is that to you, as opposed to characterization and, you know, you tend to work almost like in little vignettes, that sort of.
Yeah, I tend to get like I have an idea for a moment, like I want the character to have something happen to them, or they come to some realization. And so I'll start with that, and then I'll build the rest of the book around that one moment. So it's, all of it is based around, you know, the 2 sisters. That book started out because I wanted to do the sequence where a woman is digging a hole in the sand in the 40s and finds this golden cup or whatever that sort of frees her, or it's something she can use to saddle and get running and free her from like the life she's living. And then and the cup, I tell the older story that.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But it's like pirate times, and then I tell the story of that cup and how it got to that beach and how everything happened to that cup up until the point that it frees a woman in the 40s. So that whole book is just based around that one moment, and everything else is just window dressing.
Which is funny because really that moment, plot-wise, is not a huge moment. It's you might overlook that scene.
Yeah, it is, and yeah, that's usually what happens is that moment I wanted in there becomes just another part, and then I've made the characters sort of determine who that character is going to be, and so then that's what they do. Like the rest of it almost kind of writes itself.
Well, and it sounds like then that Matt, your writing process is a lot more kind of free form, whereas Cullen, it sounds like you're much more regimented.
Well, I would say a lot of it probably also deals with formats. Like Matt is working pretty much exclusively with graphic novels, and Cullen's working
Single issues.
Yeah.
So it has to be serialized.
Yeah,
Because you have to make sure with a single issue, with a graphic novel, you know, you have lots of room, you have lots of flexibility with single issues, and in some cases your editor will, my editors even told me to make sure you end each issue on a cliffhanger, make sure there's a big moment, you know, you have to pace it out so that these things happen every 22, 24 pages. And yeah, I think I really regimented right once I get, I think, you know, everybody wants to tell stories gets these little ideas.
Yeah.
You know, that can really spark, you know, spin off into some other story. But once I get the idea and I know kind of where it's going, it's really more important than the plot. How I'm going to get from one place to the other, for me, it's very regimented. I'll write it out, scrap it, write it out again, scrap it.
Yeah, I'm definitely spoiled just because I don't have to. You have a lot more balls you have to juggle than I do. I'm just.
I'm sure you're going with that. I was going to agree regardless.
You guys are terrible. Anywho.
Well, yeah, when you're doing a graphic novel, you can determine how long it is, and
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that was. Oh. I was just going to say real quick, on the Two Sisters book, that was one of those where I turned in it was like an 80-page description of what the book was going to be to the publisher, and they're like, oh, this looks great. And then when I turned in the pencils, they were like, why is this 300 pages long? And I was like, well, it's because for that book, I wanted to try not using any captions.
Yeah.
And so then, or having any actually scenes. There was no cut from one scene to the next. So it took an extra 200 pages to tell that story.
Captions, we do that too.
Yeah.
Captions are great. No, but The Dam, for instance, we pitched that as a graphic novel, and then the publisher came back and said, well, we want to do it as a series of issues, and that really derailed me for several weeks.
And at that point, I'd already started doing the art, so the first issue, the pacing is completely different than the next 4 issues. The first issue, there's a couple scenes that are 5 or 6 pages long at least, and Cullen and I almost have it's a rule that we broke, but we also have a rule that no scene goes longer than 3 pages. You need to get in, you need to get out, because you have so much ground, you get so much, real estate you got to cover in that 24 to 26 whatever pages. So the first issue, the pacing is much slower, a little more languid, because as a graphic novel, we have more room to sort of create a mood and set a tone. It's a little different when you're doing a monthly book.
well, I think that's also good for a first issue, though, too. If you can use that first issue of your series to kind of just set things up and take a little bit more time with it.
From my point of view, I'd rather get in with a bang and then slow down the second issue.
Oh, that makes sense, too.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
grab
everybody.
everybody's attention, and then if you need to go back and fill in the gaps, where I got it.
So, Cullen, have you, these future projects that you're not allowed to tell us about, are any of those graphic novel format, or are they all single issues?
Well, the Tooth, I can tell you about, that's the one I'm working on actually with Matt. And it's actually was pitched as a series of issues, so single issues. And then they came to us and said, we'd like you to do it as a web comic. And Matt's been, started doing it, and then they're going to collect it as a big, thick, trade paperback once it's all told.
But I think that even kind of breaks the rule, because it's still kind of told in issue-by-issue format.
Yeah.
It's just a comic we chopped up for the web.
Okay.
But Cullen wrote a graphic novel last year.
Yeah, it did. That was great.
That was
A lot of
pretty
fun.
great.
I wrote one of the,
A 200-something page graphic novel.
because I didn't use captions, it ended up being 200 and something pages. And the artist that I was working with on it, who will not be named, was very adamant. He said, "Cullen, just write it. I want it to blow the art out. I want no more than 4 panels on a page. 4 panels a page." I was like, "Are you really sure about that?" And he said, "Absolutely, 4 panels a page." So it ended up being a 200-something page graphic novel.
Wow.
And he's done nothing on it, and in all honesty, probably never will. It'll never get drawn, at least not by him. I would like to go back and compress it into about a 120-page graphic novel, because I could do it very easily, and maybe that could spur him to actually draw it.
What was that like? Yeah, what was that like writing? It's a completely different approach.
Honestly, it was kind of nice. The biggest problem I had with that was not because I just had as much room as I wanted, according to what I believed was the artist's commitment to the book. So that was nice, but I had a lot of trouble because I didn't want to do captions, because The Dam was so caption heavy. I wanted to make sure people knew this wasn't just another. I wasn't writing everything the same way.
Yeah.
Man, it's very difficult to tell a story without captions in comic form. I mean, it's really decompressed.